You are walking home. It is late evening somewhere on the edge of a big city in the early 1990s. The Soviet Union has just collapsed. The streets are darker now. Fewer patrol cars, fewer working lights, more silence between the apartment blocks. A car slows down beside you. The driver leans across the passenger seat and speaks through the open window in a calm, almost friendly voice. "Where are you going? I can give you a ride. It's on my way." He looks ordinary. Short hair, tired eyes, unshaven face, a cheap jacket over a t-shirt. The kind of man you see every day on buses, in shops, at gas stations. Working class, unremarkable, forgettable. There is nothing that screams danger. No mask, no visible weapon, no crazy stare. Just another driver offering help in a world where public transport is broken and walking alone at night feels risky. If you refuse, he insists a little more. If you agree and close the car door, the world as you know it ends. Between May 1991 and March 1992, at least 10 girls and young women got into such cars, walked through parks, or accepted rides from strangers who seemed harmless. They were beaten, raped, strangled, robbed, and left in forests, ditches, empty fields, and dark city outskirts across Russia and Ukraine. Their killer moved between two countries like a ghost, exploiting the chaos of a collapsing superpower. He was not a genius. He was not a phantom. He was a driver, a former soldier, a trained athlete, and a hypersexual sadist who later claimed to have committed hundreds of rapes before he ever killed anyone. This is the story of how an ordinary man became one of the most dangerous predators of the post-Soviet era, and how two countries, drowning in economic collapse and institutional chaos, failed to stop him until he had already destroyed more than a dozen lives. His full name was Oleg Vladimirovich Kuznetsov. He was born on April 30th, 1969, in Balashikha, a large industrial town just east of Moscow in the Soviet Union. Balashikha was a typical satellite city: gray panel apartment buildings, factories, vocational schools, and neighborhoods where most families worked long hours just to survive. There was nothing glamorous about life there. It was hard, repetitive, and gray. When Oleg was only 5 years old, his parents divorced. After the split, he stayed with his father and a new stepmother. Contact with his biological mother was completely forbidden. He was cut off from her, not allowed to see her, speak to her, or even mention her name at home. For a small child, this was abandonment without explanation. No goodbye, no letters, no understanding of why the one person who might have loved him gently was suddenly erased from his life. His father was a harsh, brutal man who believed that control meant violence. He beat Oleg regularly for bad grades, for dirty rooms, for talking back, for being in the wrong place at the wrong time. The boy learned early that the world was ruled by physical power. That anger was normal. That pain was how you teach lessons. That weakness was something to be punished. In this environment, Oleg grew up fearful and withdrawn. Psychologically, he developed two conflicting sides. On the outside, he appeared cowardly, closed off, avoiding social contact and confrontation. On the inside, he was quick-tempered, angry, and full of rage that had no safe outlet. Teachers and neighbors later described him as unsociable, quiet, someone who kept to himself and rarely smiled. But those who got close enough saw the anger underneath, a boy who could explode over nothing and stay furious for hours. The only person he felt real warmth toward was his grandmother. Even years later, locked in a prison cell and convicted of multiple murders, he would still speak about her with tenderness. She was the only softness in a childhood built on fear, control, and violence. At school, Oleg was an average student. He did not stand out in academics. He did not excel in subjects that required creativity, thinking, or patience. But from the age of 10, he found something he could control: his body. He began training in biathlon, a demanding winter sport that combines cross-country skiing and rifle shooting. He trained hard, pushed his limits, and eventually earned the title of Master of Sports of the USSR, a prestigious achievement in Soviet athletic culture. Later, he added weightlifting and hand-to-hand combat to his training regimen. He spent long hours in the gym, building muscle mass, increasing his physical strength, and shaping his body into something powerful and intimidating. To accelerate his progress, he began taking anabolic steroids. These drugs helped him grow stronger and bigger, but they also came with psychological side effects: increased aggression, mood swings, heightened irritability, and a shorter fuse for anger. For a boy already raised in violence and resentment, the steroids amplified what was already there. He became physically dominant, capable of overpowering almost anyone with ease, while emotionally remaining unstable, explosive, and dangerous. By his teenage years, Oleg had transformed from a scared, withdrawn child into a strong, muscular young man who walked through the world with a quiet sense of physical superiority. But inside, nothing had healed. The anger was still there. The resentment was still there. And soon it would find a new outlet. By the age of 16, Oleg developed an intense, obsessive need for sexual activity. He was hypersexual. During his period of active crimes, he had a huge number of sexual partners and engaged in sex 3 to 4 times per day. Many of his partners were older women. To them, he might have appeared as a strong, energetic young man from the suburbs, physically attractive, confident, sexually experienced. But there was a darker side that not all of them saw immediately. During intimacy, he often showed cruelty. Sex for him was not about connection, pleasure, or mutual desire. It was about control, domination, and the expression of aggression. He did not accept rejection well. If a woman said no, he did not see it as her right. He took it as an insult, a challenge, something that needed to be punished. This tendency to mix sex and violence, to respond to rejection with rage, would define his entire criminal career. After finishing 8 grades of school, he attended a vocational school and trained as a pattern maker for wooden models. He also studied in a DOSAF driving school, learning to drive professionally, a skill that would later become his primary weapon. By the time he was called up for military service, he was a physically powerful, sexually obsessed young man with a short temper, a deep habit of violence in personal relations, and a growing sense that the world owed him what he wanted. In 1987, Oleg Kuznetsov was drafted into the Soviet Army. He served in a motor transport company stationed near Kyiv, working around trucks and military vehicles. The Army did not create his violence. It did not turn him into a predator, but it taught him discipline, endurance, how to follow orders, and how to quietly break rules when nobody was watching. Even in the military, he violated regulations. He left his unit without permission. He drank alcohol. He repeatedly ended up in detention for minor infractions. He did not build strong bonds with fellow soldiers. He stayed distant, conflicted, irritable, avoiding close friendships or emotional connections. After his discharge, he returned to civilian life and worked as a driver for different enterprises. He lived in a communal apartment, a typical cramped Soviet living space shared with other families, with little privacy and constant tension. According to his stepmother, after the army he became more selfish, arrogant, and secretive. He almost always carried a knife with him. That knife was not just for self-defense, it was a tool of intimidation, a symbol of control, and later, a weapon he would use to threaten, terrorize, and dominate his victims. Some sources state that even before and during his army service, between 1985 and 1988, he committed several rapes. That means his path as a sexual predator began years before the first known killing. By the time he returned to Balashikha in the late 1980s, Oleg Kuznetsov was a ticking bomb, physically powerful, sexually obsessed, emotionally unstable, and already experienced in sexual violence. On May 7, 1991, Oleg Kuznetsov crossed a line. At that time, he was working as a truck driver. A young woman asked him to give her a ride home. It was a normal request. Drivers often gave rides to people they knew, or even strangers, especially in areas where public transport was unreliable. On the way, he started talking to her, relaxed her guard, and offered her alcohol. He then stopped the truck in a forest belt near a dacha village called Kupavna in the Balashikha district. There, they had sex. But in the morning, the woman told him that he had to pay her for the night of love. Otherwise, she would report him to the police. It is unclear whether she was serious or joking, whether she was a sex worker or simply trying to scare him. For Oleg, it did not matter. Those words triggered his rage. He grabbed a crowbar and beat her to death. He left her body in the forest belt, where it was later discovered by passers-by. This first murder showed his pattern clearly: sex, conflict, a perceived threat to his control, explosive anger, and lethal violence. It also showed something else. He could kill and walk away. He could return to his ordinary life, go to work, sleep, eat, and continue as if nothing had happened. For him, murder was not an unbearable moral crisis. It was just another way to solve a problem. From May to November 1991, Oleg Kuznetsov launched a wave of rapes in Balashikha, the Balashikha district, and nearby areas of the Moscow region. Sometimes he committed 2 rapes in a single day. He usually attacked in the dark, at night or late evening, in places with few people around. He threatened his victims with a knife, using the fear of death to force compliance. He preferred isolated spots, empty streets, backyards, forest belts, parks, cemeteries. For him, these were not just places, they were hunting grounds. Later, during interrogations, he would claim that he had committed between 500 and 700 rapes in his life. That number cannot be fully verified. Some of it may be exaggeration, part of his desire to be seen as a legend. But experts note that such a scale is plausible given his hypersexuality, his mobility as a driver, and the social reality of the time. In the early 1990s, many victims of sexual violence did not go to the police. They were afraid of shame, stigma, or not being believed. They feared being blamed for walking alone, for dressing a certain way, for accepting a ride. For Kuznetsov, this silence worked like a shield. Each unreported crime taught him that he could keep going. Each woman who did not file a report was proof that the system would not stop him. On the night of November 12th to 13th, 1991, he committed one of his most revealing early crimes. Threatening with a knife, he raped a woman at a Balashikha cemetery. The victim was not a stranger. She was his former lover, a woman he had broken up with months earlier after seeing another man kiss her. This attack was not just sexual, it was revenge. He chose a cemetery, a place of death, mourning, and silence, as the stage for punishing her betrayal. This time, the woman did not stay silent. She went to the police and filed a report. On the same day, Oleg Kuznetsov fled Balashikha. Using the collapse of the Soviet Union and the separation of Ukraine, he moved to Kyiv, where he had once served in the army. He believed that in the confusion of the country's breakup, with borders still porous and law enforcement structures in chaos, nobody would actively search for him there. In Kyiv, he quickly found a new lover and moved in with her. She had no idea who he really was or what he had done back in Russia. Around this time, Oleg made a decision that would define the rest of his life. From now on, he would not just rape, he would kill his victims. Rape left witnesses, rape left complaints, rape left the possibility of arrest. But murder eliminated all of that. For him, killing was not an escalation driven by madness. It was a cold, practical decision to reduce risk. In Kyiv, Oleg Kuznetsov committed 4 murders, each combined with rape and robbery. The victims were Svetlana Milenko, Svetlana Muromtseva, Alla Kononova, and Natalia Ivanchikova. These crimes took place on January 6th, 19th, 24th, and 27th of 1992. The timing shows a rapid, almost mechanical rhythm. He applied the same pattern. He met the women, lured or isolated them, raped them, robbed them, and then killed them. His cruelty escalated. In some cases, he mutilated his victims' eyes and genitals. He brought some of the murdered women's belongings back to his lover and gave them to her as gifts. She wore jewelry, carried bags, and used items that once belonged to women he had raped and killed, without knowing the real origin. These Kyiv murders turned him into an active serial killer operating in another country. But he was not finished yet. His last attack in Kyiv ended differently. He chose another woman and introduced himself as Dmitry Fadeyev from Balashikha. Her name was Oksana Kozhedub. He attacked her, but she resisted fiercely. Oksana managed to fight him off and survive. She later gave the police a detailed description of her attacker, his appearance, his behavior, the way he changed when she resisted. Because of his false name, Dmitry, investigators began to refer to him as False Dmitry, Ljedmitry. He had tried to hide behind a fake identity, but instead gave them a memorable clue. After this failed attack in February, police officers who recognized him from the composite sketch almost caught him. He managed to escape by jumping into the Dnipro River. This close call pushed him to leave Kyiv. He returned to Russia, believing he could start over and keep killing in another environment. In February 1992, Kuznetsov moved back to Russia, settling in Moscow. He began to operate in the area around Izmailovsky Park, a large, partially wooded zone in the eastern part of the city. There, he committed 5 more murders similar in method to the Kyiv crimes. These took place on February 25th and on March 3rd, 9th, 13th, and 21st, 1992. The victims were again girls and young women. They were raped, robbed, and killed with extreme cruelty, sometimes with eye mutilation similar to the Kyiv cases. The consistent signature, including the mutilated eyes, caught the attention of Moscow criminal investigators. They suspected that the same maniac who had disappeared from Kyiv was now killing in Moscow. Officers from the Ukrainian Ministry of Internal Affairs were invited to Moscow. They shared valuable information, including the composite sketch of the wanted killer. That sketch was distributed across the city. One day, an employee of a Sberbank office recognized a man who had opened an account there as the person from the sketch. His name, Oleg Kuznetsov. This was where Kuznetsov was officially registered, though he did not live there permanently. He sent his current lover to that address to deliver money to his father. Her visit was noticed by the surveillance team. Soon, investigators approached the woman and informed her of their suspicions about her partner. She agreed to help them capture him. They installed a silent alarm system and a panic button in her apartment. She was instructed to press the button as soon as Kuznetsov appeared. To avoid scaring him away, they decided not to place obvious external surveillance directly on the building. The plan depended on surprise. On the evening of March 26, 1992, Kuznetsov arrived at his lover's apartment. However, he sensed danger almost immediately and left quickly. After he walked out, the woman pressed the panic button. Operational teams rushed to her address. She told them she had seen him heading toward the nearest tram stop. Only one tram route passed near the building. Several plainclothes police groups were sent to check the trams on that line. In one of them, officers spotted a man matching the description. When they approached him, they detained him. During the arrest, they seized a knife from him. The man they took off the tram that day was the same person whose image had been circulating on sketches in Kyiv and Moscow. It was the end of the road for Oleg Kuznetsov. After his arrest, Kuznetsov confessed to all the murders and rapes.
Хотел расписываться, когда в Киеве был. Мои документы оформлялись там с одной девушкой в ЗАГСе.
During searches, police found women's belongings in his possession, objects taken from his victims. They were silent witnesses linking him directly to attacks and killings. A forensic psychiatric examination was ordered. Experts declared him fully sane and criminally responsible. At the same time, they found psychopathic personality traits and clear sexual sadism. He understood what he was doing and could control his actions. He simply chose not to. When asked why he became a killer, he blamed the attitude of others and the offenses he had suffered. He portrayed himself as a good person, driven to murder by the world around him. According to him, the trigger for his violence during the murders was the refusal of women to have sex with him. He claimed that when he approached them, he did not initially intend to kill. The decision came when they rejected him. This self-justification shows how he saw women, not as human beings, but as objects that owed him what he wanted. On December 1st, 1993, the court sentenced Oleg Kuznetsov to death by shooting. Given the number of victims and the brutality of his crimes, this was the harshest possible penalty. By that time, he was formally recognized as a Soviet, Russian, and Ukrainian serial killer and rapist who had murdered 10 girls and women aged between 15 and 30. However, during the 1990s, Russia and Ukraine moved toward European legal standards. Both countries joined the Council of Europe, which strongly opposed the death penalty. In 1999, his death sentence was commuted to life imprisonment. He would no longer face a firing squad, but he would never be free again. From 1999, Kuznetsov served his life sentence in a special regime colony, IK-1, Mordovskaya Zona, in the village of Sosnovka, Zubovo-Polyansky district, Republic of Mordovia. This prison housed some of the most dangerous criminals in the country. Even behind bars, he did not admit his guilt. He remained closed and distant, barely speaking even with his cellmate. On August 4, 2000, he died in custody from heart failure. For many years, the public did not even know that he was dead. His death became widely known only around 2019. He was buried in Balashikha at the Novoderevenkovskoye Cemetery. There, under a gravestone with his name and dates, lies a man who once terrorized women in both Russia and Ukraine. No execution, no dramatic finale, just a quiet, anonymous death in a prison for killers. The case of Oleg Kuznetsov is more than the biography of one maniac. It is a portrait of how violence, hypersexuality, and sadism can grow inside a broken family and a collapsing state. It shows how early signs were ignored, how victims' silence allowed him to escalate, and how chaos between two countries let him kill across borders. He claimed to have committed between 500 and 700 rapes before he ever killed anyone. That number may never be fully verified, but it raises a terrifying question about how many attacks never reached the police, never appeared in any report, and were buried in shame and fear. He died quietly in prison, not from execution, but from heart failure. No dramatic finale, no public closure, just a silent death in a cell and a grave in Balashikha where strangers walk past without knowing who lies beneath. Behind every detail of his biography stand real victims, girls and women who just wanted to get home safely and met a man who had been allowed to go too far for far too long. But here is the question that still haunts this case. If just one of those early victims had been believed, if just one rape report had been taken seriously before he killed, how many lives could have been saved? What do you think? Could the system have stopped him earlier, or was he always destined to become a killer? Write your thoughts in the comments below.